The autumn wind carried the scent of dying grass across the barren fields of the Broken Arrow Ranch as Sam McKinnon stood on his porch, surveying what remained of his life's work. 3 years of drought had turned his once fertile land into a wasteland of cracked earth and withered dreams. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and he had exactly $17 to his name. Sam was a man carved from the same tough timber as the fence posts that still stood defiantly around his property. At 32, his hands bore the calluses of honest work, his face the weathered lines of a man who'd stared down adversity more times than he cared to count. His late father had built this ranch from nothing, and Sam would be damned if he'd be the McKinnon to lose it. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew his attention to the dusty road that wound past his property. A lone rider emerged from the heat shimmer, moving slowly, deliberately. As the figure drew closer, Sam could make out the distinctive silhouette of a Native American woman, her long black hair braided with colorful beads that caught the afternoon sun. She rode bareback on a paint horse that looked as weary as its rider, and even from a distance, Sam could see the exhaustion in her posture. When she reached the edge of his property, she stopped, her dark eyes taking in the modest ranch house, the empty fields, and the man standing on the porch watching her. "Water," she said simply, her voice carrying across the space between them. "Please." Sam didn't hesitate. Whatever tensions existed between white settlers and the local tribes, a person in need was a person in need. He walked to the well and drew up a bucket of cool, clear water, then approached her slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. "For you and your horse," he said, offering the bucket. The woman slid down from her mount with fluid grace, though Sam noticed the slight tremor in her legs that spoke of long hours in the saddle. She was beautiful in the way that wild things are beautiful, untamed, proud, with high cheekbones and eyes that held depths of sorrow and strength. "I am Ayanna," she said after drinking deeply. "Widow of Chief Running Bear." Sam's breath caught. He'd heard of Running Bear, a respected leader who died in a skirmish with cavalry soldiers 6 months ago. The loss had left his small band of followers scattered and struggling to survive. "Sam McKinnon," he replied, tipping his hat. "This is my ranch. What brings you so far from your people?" Ayanna's eyes flickered with something that might have been shame. "My people, they struggle. The reservation land gives little food. The government promises much, delivers little." She paused, her hand resting on her horse's neck. "I search for work, for food. My children." She didn't finish the sentence, but Sam heard the desperation she was trying to hide. He looked at this proud woman, reduced to begging from strangers, and felt something twist in his chest. He knew what it was like to watch everything you'd worked for slip away. "How many children?" he asked quietly. 3. 2 boys, 1 girl. The youngest is only 4 summers. Sam was quiet for a long moment, his mind racing. In his barn sat the last of his harvest, 50 bushels of corn that represented his final hope of making the mortgage payment. It wasn't enough to save the ranch, but it might buy him another month to figure something out. "Wait here," he said suddenly, turning toward the barn. Ayanna watched in confusion as the white farmer disappeared into the weathered building. She could hear the sound of grain being moved, the creak of wooden wheels. When Sam emerged, he was pushing a wheelbarrow loaded with burlap sacks. "Corn," he said simply. "Should feed your family for a month, maybe more if you're careful with it." Ayanna stared at the grain, then at Sam, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I cannot pay. Didn't ask you to. But this is much food. Valuable." Sam shrugged, though the gesture cost him more than she could know. "My pa always said a man's worth isn't measured by what he keeps, but by what he gives when he has little to spare." Tears gathered in Ayanna's eyes, and for a moment the proud mask slipped, revealing the desperate mother beneath. Why would you help me? Your people and mine." "My people and your people are just people," Sam said firmly. "And people help people. That's how it should be." As Sam helped load the grain onto Ayanna's horse, she studied his face, memorizing every line, every weathered feature. "I will not forget this kindness, Sam McKinnon. My children will know your name. Just take care of those little ones," Sam replied. "That's payment enough." As Ayanna rode away, her horse laden with grain, Sam stood in his empty barn and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The corn had been his last hope, his final card to play. Now he had nothing left but 2 weeks and a prayer. But as he watched the woman disappear into the distance, carrying food to her hungry children, Sam found he couldn't regret his choice. Some things were more important than money, more valuable than land. Even if it meant losing everything he'd ever worked for. 2 days passed in a haze of worry and sleepless nights. Sam spent his time trying to figure out how to explain to the bank that he couldn't make his payment, how to tell his neighbors that the McKinnon ranch was finished. He'd written and rewritten a dozen letters to his sister back east, asking for a loan he knew she couldn't afford to give. On the third morning, Sam was repairing a broken fence post when he heard them coming. At first, it was just a distant rumble like thunder rolling across the plains. But as the sound grew closer, Sam realized it wasn't thunder at all, it was hoofbeats. Lots of them. He straightened slowly, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle leaning against the fence post. In the distance, a cloud of dust was approaching, and as it drew nearer, Sam could make out the shapes of riders. Many riders. His mouth went dry as he counted them. 20, 30, 50, more than he could easily track. All mounted on painted horses, all moving with the fluid grace of born horsemen. Native warriors, their faces painted for war, their weapons glinting in the morning sun. Sam's first instinct was to run for the house, to barricade himself inside and hope they'd pass by. But something made him stand his ground, even as his heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird. If this was the end, he'd meet it standing up. The war party crested the hill overlooking his ranch and stopped, their horses dancing restlessly as the riders surveyed the property below. Sam could feel their eyes on him, could sense the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. Then, from the center of the group, a single rider emerged. Sam's breath caught as he recognized Ayanna, though she looked different now, regal, commanding, every inch the chief's widow. She rode down the hill toward him, her back straight, her head held high. "Sam McKinnon," she called out as she approached. "You remember me?" "Hard to forget," Sam replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Though you've brought quite a few friends this time." Ayanna's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "These are my people. The scattered bands of my husband's tribe, and others who have heard the story." "What story?" "The story of the white farmer who gave his last harvest to a hungry widow and her children. The story of a man who chose kindness over profit, generosity over greed." Sam felt heat rise in his cheeks. "It was just corn, ma'am. Nothing special about it." "Nothing special?" Ayanna's voice carried clearly across the yard, and Sam realized she was speaking as much to her warriors as to him. "You gave food to strangers when you had little for yourself. You showed honor when you could have shown hatred. In my culture, such actions create a debt that must be repaid." "I don't want any repayment," Sam said quickly. "I told you that. And I told you that my children would know your name," Ayanna replied. "They do. And so do their cousins and their friends and every member of every band within 100 miles of here." She gestured toward the warriors gathered on the hill, and Sam felt his knees go weak as he truly comprehended the size of the force arrayed before him. There had to be 200 of them, maybe more. "We have come to honor the debt," Ayanna continued. "To show that the people remember kindness and that kindness is never forgotten." "I appreciate the sentiment," Sam said carefully, "but I'm not sure what you're getting at." Ayanna's smile widened, and for the first time, Sam saw genuine warmth in her eyes. "You gave us corn, Sam McKinnon. We give you harvest." Before Sam could ask what she meant, Ayanna raised her hand in a signal. The warriors on the hill let out a war cry that made Sam's blood run cold, then came thundering down toward the ranch. For a moment, Sam was certain he was about to die, that his act of kindness had somehow been misinterpreted as an insult. But instead of attacking, the warriors spread out across his property with military precision. Some headed for his fields, others toward his barn, still others to his vegetable garden. And then Sam saw what they were carrying, not weapons but tools. Hoes and shovels, sickles and baskets. "What's happening?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Harvest," Ayanna said simply. "Your neighbor's harvest. We have been gathering it for 3 days from every farm within 50 miles. Payment for the kindness you showed to one hungry widow." Sam watched in amazement as the warriors worked with incredible efficiency. They moved through his property like a well-oiled machine, filling his barn with grain, his root cellar with vegetables, his smokehouse with preserved meat. Corn, wheat, barley, potatoes, carrots, beans, more food than Sam had seen in one place since before the drought began. "This is impossible," Sam breathed. "The other farmers, they'd never give up their crops." "Not willingly." "Who said anything about giving?" Ayanna asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "We traded. Horses for grain, beadwork for vegetables, hunting rights for preserved meat. Fair trades, all of them." "But why? Why would you do all this?" Ayanna dismounted and walked to stand beside Sam, both of them watching the organized chaos of the harvest. "Because you showed us that not all white men are our enemies. Because you proved that honor still exists in this world. And because—" She paused, her voice growing softer. "Because my children sleep with full bellies because of you. That is a debt that can never truly be repaid, but we can try." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Sam watched his empty barn fill to bursting with the fruits of a dozen different farms. His mortgage payment was no longer a problem. He could probably pay off the entire ranch and still have enough left over to last through the winter. But more than that, he realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Two peoples who had every reason to hate each other, coming together in an act of mutual respect and gratitude. It gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a future where such cooperation could be the rule rather than the exception. Word of the great harvest spread across the territory like wildfire, carried by traders, travelers, and anyone else who witnessed the unprecedented sight of 200 native warriors working peacefully alongside a white farmer. Some called it a miracle, others a sign of the changing times. But in the town of Cedar Falls, 15 miles from Sam's ranch, the news was met with suspicion and fear. "It's not natural," declared Mayor Cornelius Whitman during an emergency town meeting. "Indians don't just give away food. There's got to be some kind of trick, some trap." Sheriff Tom Bradley, a weathered man with more sense than most, shook his head. "I rode out there myself, Cornelius. Saw it with my own eyes. They're just helping the man who helped them. Nothing sinister about it." "Nothing sinister?" Whitman's voice rose to a near shriek. "Tom, there were 200 armed savages on that property. What's to stop them from deciding they want more than just to help? What's to stop them from taking whatever they please?" The murmur of agreement from the assembled townspeople made Bradley's jaw tighten. He'd seen this kind of fear before, had watched it turn good people into a mob more dangerous than any war party. "Because," came a calm voice from the back of the room, "they're not savages and they're not thieves." All heads turned to see Sam McKinnon standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands, his clothes still dusty from the road. He'd ridden into town to buy supplies and pay his mortgage, but the sound of raised voices had drawn him to the meeting. "McKinnon." Whitman pointed an accusing finger at him. "What have you done? What kind of deal did you make with those people?" Sam walked slowly down the center aisle, his boots echoing in the sudden silence. "I gave a hungry woman some corn. That's all." "That's all?" Whitman laughed harshly. "That's all, and now we've got a war party camped on our doorstep." "They're not camped anywhere," Sam said patiently. "They came, they helped, they left. Most of them are probably 50 miles away by now. But they could come back." This from Mrs. Henderson, the schoolteacher, her voice tight with worry. "What if they decide they want more? What if they decide to take our children, our homes?" Sam looked around the room at the frightened faces, and felt a deep sadness settle in his chest. These were good people, most of them, but fear had a way of making good people do terrible things. "Mrs. Henderson," he said gently, "Ayanna, that's the woman I helped. She has 3 children of her own. You think she'd want to hurt yours? She's a savage." Whitman spat. "They all are. You can't trust them, McKinnon. They'll smile at you one day and scalp you the next." "The only savage behavior I've seen lately," Sam said, his voice hardening, "is right here in this room." The words hit like a slap, and several men rose from their seats, their faces flushed with anger. But before anyone could speak, the door burst open and young Billy Patterson stumbled in, his eyes wide with excitement. "They're back," he gasped. "The Indians are back. Hundreds of them coming down the main road." Panic erupted in the meeting hall. Women screamed, men shouted for their guns, and Mayor Whitman began bellowing orders about barricades and defensive positions. But Sam was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward the door. Outside, he could see them coming, a long line of riders moving slowly down the dusty main street. But something was wrong with the picture the townspeople were painting. These weren't warriors riding to battle. They were families, men, women, children, elders, all traveling together with pack horses and travois loaded with goods. At the head of the procession rode Ayanna, but she wasn't alone. Beside her rode an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes, wearing the elaborate headdress of a chief. Behind them came what looked like representatives from a dozen different tribes, all riding together in peaceful formation. The procession stopped in the town square, and Ayanna dismounted, her movements graceful and deliberate. The elderly chief followed suit, and together they approached the crowd of townspeople who had spilled out of the meeting hall. "I am Chief Joseph Crowfeather," the old man said, his voice carrying easily across the square. "I speak for the Council of 7 Tribes. We come in peace, seeking words with the people of this town." Mayor Whitman pushed his way to the front of the crowd, his face red with indignation. "What do you want? Why have you brought this army to our town?" Chief Crowfeather's eyes twinkled with what might have been amusement. "Army? These are my grandchildren, my nephews and nieces, my friends and neighbors. We come not as warriors but as people seeking understanding." "Understanding of what?" Sheriff Bradley asked, his hand resting casually on his gun belt but his tone respectful. Ayanna stepped forward, her gaze finding Sam in the crowd. We come because of the story of Sam McKinnon. The story of a white man who showed kindness to a stranger, who chose generosity over fear. It's a trap, Whitman shouted. Don't listen to them. But Chief Crowfeather continued as if the mayor hadn't spoken. For too long, our peoples have known only mistrust and violence. But this man, he gestured toward Sam, has shown us that another way is possible. We come to propose a treaty. Not with your government but with your hearts. The crowd murmured uncertainly, some voices hostile, others curious. Sam felt the weight of every eye upon him, the responsibility of a moment that could change everything. What kind of treaty? He asked, stepping forward. Chief Crowfeather smiled, and in that smile, Sam saw hope for a future he'd never dared to imagine. The treaty negotiations took place under the great oak tree in the center of Cedar Falls Town Square, with representatives from both communities sitting in a circle that would have been unthinkable just days before. Chief Crowfeather had insisted on the traditional format, explaining that circles had no beginning and no end, no head and no foot, all voices were equal. Sam found himself serving as an unofficial mediator, trusted by both sides in a way that surprised even him. Mayor Whitman had initially objected to his involvement, but when it became clear that the native representatives would only speak freely in Sam's presence, even the mayor had to concede. The proposal is simple, Chief Crowfeather explained, his weathered hands gesturing as he spoke. Trade instead of raids. Cooperation instead of conflict. Your people have skills we need, metalworking, medicine, education for our children. Our people have knowledge you need, hunting, tracking, survival in this harsh land. And what guarantee do we have, asked Banker Morrison, a thin man with suspicious eyes, that you won't simply take what you want by force? Ayanna spoke up, her voice clear and strong. The same guarantee you give us, Mr. Morrison. The guarantee of honor, of keeping one's word. But your people have broken treaties before, Mrs. Henderson said, though her tone was more curious than accusatory. As have yours, Chief Crowfeather replied gently. But those were treaties made by governments, by men who lived far from this land and knew nothing of our daily struggles. This treaty would be different. This would be made by neighbors, by people who must live side by side. Sheriff Bradley leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. What exactly are you proposing? Specifics, I mean. Chief Crowfeather nodded approvingly. Practical questions deserve practical answers. We propose seasonal markets where our peoples can trade freely. We propose shared hunting grounds with rules agreed upon by both sides. We propose that your children and ours learn together, sharing knowledge and language. Integrated schools? Mayor Whitman's voice rose in alarm. That's unheard of. So was a white farmer giving his last harvest to a hungry native widow? Ayanna said quietly. Yet it happened. And because it happened, we are all here today talking instead of fighting. Sam watched the faces around the circle, seeing fear and hope warring in equal measure. He thought about his empty barn, now full to bursting with grain. He thought about Ayanna's children, sleeping with full bellies. He thought about the future his father had dreamed of when he'd first claimed this land. I have a question, Sam said, and all eyes turned to him. What happens when the first problem arises? Because there will be problems. People are people, and sometimes people make mistakes or let fear get the better of them. Chief Crowfeather smiled, clearly pleased by the question. We propose a council with representatives from both communities. When problems arise, and you are right, they will arise, the council meets to find solutions. No violence, no revenge, just people working together to solve problems. And if the council can't reach agreement? Sheriff Bradley asked. Then we ask Sam McKinnon to decide, Ayanna said simply. The suggestion caused an uproar. Half the townspeople began talking at once, some objecting to giving such power to a simple farmer, others questioning why the native representatives would trust a white man with such authority. Why me? Sam asked when the noise died down. Because, Chief Crowfeather said, you have already shown that you can put the needs of others before your own interests. Because you see people as people, not as enemies to be feared or conquered. Because both sides trust you. The debate continued for hours, with details hammered out, objections raised and addressed, compromises reached. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the basic framework of an agreement began to emerge. There would be a trial period of 1 year. Monthly markets would be held in the town square, with goods and services traded freely. A joint council would meet weekly to address any issues that arose. Children from both communities would attend school together 3 days a week, learning from both native and white teachers. And Sam McKinnon, the farmer who had started it all with a simple act of kindness, would serve as the final arbiter in any disputes that couldn't be resolved through normal channels. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for that kind of responsibility," Sam said as the meeting began to wind down. "None of us are qualified for what we're attempting," Chief Crowfeather replied. "But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try." As the two communities began to mingle, sharing food and stories around small fires that sprang up throughout the square, Sam found himself standing beside Ayanna, both of them watching the unprecedented scene of cooperation and friendship. "Do you think it will work?" Ayanna asked softly. Sam was quiet for a moment, watching a group of native and white children playing together, their laughter echoing across the square. "I think," he said finally, "that if we can start with kindness and build from there, we might just surprise ourselves." Ayanna smiled, and in that smile, Sam saw the same hope he felt growing in his own heart. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, moments when fear threatened to overwhelm trust. But they had taken the first step, and sometimes the first step was the hardest part of any journey. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sam looked around at the faces illuminated by firelight, native and white, young and old, all brought together by the simple truth that kindness, once given, has a way of multiplying beyond all expectation. His father had always said that a man's worth wasn't measured by what he kept, but by what he gave when he had little to spare. Looking around at the harvest of peace that had grown from a single act of generosity, Sam finally understood what the old man had meant. Sometimes the smallest seeds grow into the mightiest trees.